This video is all about how you can turn one stencil into something unexpected and create two completely different cards from it. I will show you how to still use a stencil print even when it did not turn out perfectly and turn it into something you will actually love. One card is finished using only dies and the other one using only stamps, both from the On the Farm collection. And yes, I could not resist using the Action Wobbler again. So there's plenty to watch and plenty to learn. Enjoy watching! Hello, it's CisVolk. Time to enjoy card making with me. I start by taking a piece of blue cardstock from the Christmas cardstock paper by Vaessen Creative. It is a beautiful farm-style blue color that works perfectly together with the new handkerchief stencil from the On the Farm collection by Carla Creates. I will use the stencil with white paste. The paste will stay on top of the blue cardstock, creating that typical farm handkerchief look. By taping down the stencil with masking tape, it stays nicely in place. It does not shift and it helps to keep the edges clean. But still, paste can sneak underneath the stencil and that is exactly what goes wrong here. I'm using a small spatula and I move over the stencil far too often and in different directions. For me, this is really a trial and error because I have to be honest, working with paste and stencils is not my strongest point. The best result is usually achieved when you use a stencil adhesive spray and stick the stencil down onto the paper. That way nothing can get underneath. But I decided not to do that and instead I used a small spatula that fits into the jar. That turned out to be a mistake because with a small spatula you need more movements and that creates streaks. In the end, the result is not what I was hoping for, but I'm not going to throw away this piece. There is still a part that looks good and I already have an idea to use it in a fun way. I'm going to try again and make a better stencil print. This time I approach it differently. I again tape down the stencil with masking tape and still skip the stencil spray. This time I first place the paste onto a wider spatula, using the small one, so I do not have to go back and forth as much. I know the trick is to keep the spatula as flat as possible for the best result. So fingers crossed. I do have to say my paste is already a bit older, so it is slightly drier than when it was new. Very wet paste tends to seep under the stencil more easily, but very dry paste is harder to spread, especially when there are small dry particles in it, as you might notice there in the right. This stencil print turned out perfectly and I'm really happy with it. But even if it had not turned out this well, you can still use it in a creative way. A lot of it can be trimmed away or covered with fun die cuts. Let's start with the final print, the one that turned out well. It really looks like a real farm handkerchief now, which is so much fun. I trimmed the edges so that the border is even on all sides. Now I will decorate the card with dies from the On the Farm collection. I take the windmill, the shovel, the rake and the hay. I also used these dies in my previous video with the horse in the stable door. You can find a link in the description if you would like to watch that one as well. I die cut all elements from the white textured cardstock. Then I cut all the shapes again. The idea is to stack them and glue them together. You can use liquid glue for this, but I prefer double-sided tape because it is easier and less messy. So first I apply double-sided tape to the cardstock and then run it through the die cutting machine. Gluing the rake and the shovel can be a bit tricky. So I first remove the sticky piece from the backing sheet. And I place the non-sticky piece into the negative shape. This keeps it perfectly in place and makes it much easier to layer them neatly. I do the same for the shovel. If you skip this step, the handle can bend easily and you might glue it on crooked. The hay has small cut lines. By gently pushing them forward with a pickup tool, you create a bit more dimension. A rubber mat would work even better for this, and you could also use a scoring tool. But since the details are so small, this works just fine. The double-sided tape makes stacking very easy. The windmill needs to be extra strong because I want it to spin. So I add an extra layer, again using double-sided tape. Carefully remove the die cut from the cardstock. Bend the leftover paper backwards and gently lift the shape out using a pickup tool or the tip of your scissors. Do not pull on one of the points of the windmill because it might tear. I keep the windmill on the tip of my pickup tool and attach the third layer. I decided to keep all die cuts white. That way they match perfectly with the blue and white handkerchief background. With a silver gel pen I add some subtle accents to the windmill. I draw lines on the embossed windows and door so they stand out more and make a better contrast. You can insert a small brad through the small hole and open it at the back. That way you can actually turn the blades, which is such a fun detail. Imagine you created some messy spots right in the middle of your stencil. Then you can simply cover those with your die cuts. Problem gone, and no need to throw anything away. I keep the stencil piece as it is, so square, and that means I will make a square card base. I take a piece of A4 cardstock, and since I only use my guillotine trimmer and a small scoring board, I use the bottom of the trimmer to measure and score at 14.5 cm. Then I fold the paper nicely with a bone folder and trim both sides down to 14.5 cm using the guillotine. The stencil panel with the handkerchief pattern I cut down to 14 cm, so I get a small white border all around. I attach the panel using double-sided tape. Did you know that if you do not remove all the backing at once, but leave small pieces attached on the corners, you can still move the panel slightly into place? The parts where the backing is still on allow you to slide it around a bit. Once everything is perfectly aligned, you remove the remaining backing pieces and press it down. Now I can also glue down the windmill and the other die cuts. For the second card I will stamp and color a cute pig. As always I use smooth white watercolor paper by Florence in A6 size. This paper is great for stamping and coloring because of the smooth surface, and it holds the ink very nicely. I stamp using a clear block and I start with the head. The body is a separate stamp, so you can use it on its own or stamp it together with the head. Watch how I stamp, heat emboss and color this cute pig. For more detailed instructions on these steps, I recommend watching my previous video where I explain everything step by step. After coloring, I will show you how to combine this stamped pig with the handkerchief stencil and how I finish the card. For coloring I use the following 4 colors: Tattered Rose, Festive Berries, Chipped Sapphire and Black Soot. I didn't end up using Crackling Campfire. When cutting out the pig, you can choose to keep it as one piece. In that case, I would stamp the body a little closer to the head. I choose to cut the body and the head separately. Later, I will attach the head with an action wobbler so it can move nicely on the card, which adds a fun extra effect. I leave the cutting part in the video on purpose so you can see how to cut those tricky little hairs on top of the head. And also the part of the body where there's no stamped outline. With a white gel pen you can add beautiful highlights to your colored image. I always add tiny dots in the pupils. And also on the cheeks. That makes it look extra cute. I don't want to throw away the failed stencil print. Even though the paste went underneath the stencil in some areas, there are still parts that look good. You can easily use a corner or a diagonal piece on a card, and the rest can be covered with a stamped image or die cuts. I will now use the pig together with a part of the paper that did turn out nicely, and I will show you how to use it. I want the pig to hang over the edge of the handkerchief. I could place the belly and the legs over the edge, but to me that looks a bit unnatural in this case, so instead I make a small cut along the legs, so the belly can go behind the paper and the legs fall over the front. Make sure you cut right next to the leg, so the stamped black outline of the leg stays visible. That part will be on top of the paper and you want to keep that detail. Cutting the left leg can be a bit tricky, so take your time and cut slowly and carefully, all the way up to the shoulder of the pig. Then place the belly behind the paper and let the legs hang over the front. The head can be placed later, but for now I first want to choose the background sentiments and add some color to a background panel. The corners of the handkerchief that I don't need can be trimmed away. To do that, I first place the handkerchief where I want it. Then I flip it together with the card and mark roughly where I can cut. Since I want to use an action wobbler on this card and attach it invisibly, I will create the background on a separate piece of paper. Because my card base is regular cardstock and I want to add water splatters later, I use a piece of watercolor paper for this. The position of the handkerchief and the pig is already decided. To know exactly where I can add color on the background, it is easiest to stamp the sentiments first. You can see here how I place the stamps one by one onto the clear block. I do this on purpose so they don't stick to each other or to my fingers. And if they are still not perfectly straight, I simply adjust them again. Before stamping, I first check the placement with the pig still on the paper, so I know exactly where I want the image. Then I remove the pig and the handkerchief so they don't accidentally get dirty. I stamp with VersaFine ink because I know it will give me a crisp result in one go. I carefully check if the lines on my clear block are aligned with the edges of the paper. That way I know the text will be straight. This sentiment is quite far to the right, so to balance the design, I add another sentiment on the left side. Oink! Nice and playful. I also add embossing powder on top and melt it with the heat tool. In the areas where the pig and the handkerchief will be placed later, I don't need to add any ink. That is why I trace the outline of the handkerchief. Just a little bit lower, because you don't want to see those lines later. For the background I use the same colors as for coloring the pig. Black soot and chipped sapphire. I press the ink pad onto a piece of plastic, but you can also use a clear block or a small plate. Then I take a wet brush and mix it into the ink. I start with the blue. I tap the ink off the brush by tapping it against my finger, but you could also tap it against another brush or a pen, so you can tap it a bit harder without it hurting. I let this layer of splatters dry first before adding the black splatters. I clean my brush and then pick up the black ink with a slightly damp brush. With more water you get lighter and larger splatters. That is why I keep my brush only slightly wet. I try to concentrate the splatters in the areas that will remain visible once the pig and the handkerchief are in place. From a piece of acetate, I die cut an action wobbler, using the die from the Carla Creates collection. I turn my work mat around because I will need the cutting edge in a moment. To attach the action wobbler, I glue the handkerchief flat onto the paper, using Glue Easy by Vaessen Creative. I also add glue to the back of the pig's legs and to the front of the belly. Then I slide the body neatly around the edge of the handkerchief and glue it onto the panel. I'm still not using the folded card base at this point. Now I measure where the slit for the action wobbler needs to go. I look carefully at how high I want the pig's head, because the wobbler needs to fit perfectly behind it. I make a small mark where I want to cut. When I insert the wobbler through the slit and twist it 1 to 3 times, part of it will still sit behind the panel, and the rest will sit here. That feels a bit too much to the right, so I move it slightly more to the left. If you want to learn more about the action wobbler and how to make and attach it, have a look at the video and reel I made about it. You will find the link in the description below. The card with the pig is now finished, but the other card is not yet done. I will stamp the sentiment and heat emboss it with silver embossing powder by Ranger. Feel free to leave a question in the comments below this video if something is not completely clear. But you are also very welcome to leave a comment if you enjoyed watching. I always really appreciate that, and it motivates me to keep creating. To finish this card, I add a few final details that really bring everything together. I love how this project shows that even a stencil print that did not turn out as planned can still become something beautiful. By selecting the best parts and combining them with stamping, coloring and a bit of dimension, you can turn it into a nice handmade card. You have also seen how to make your stamped image more interesting by letting parts fall behind and over the paper, and of course by adding movement with an action wobbler. That little detail makes such a difference and adds a fun surprise to your card. If you enjoyed this video and you like this kind of card making inspiration, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I share a new video every Monday with ideas, tips and techniques to help you get more out of your supplies. Let me know in the comments which card you like most, or if you have ever tried to use a stencil print that did not go as planned. I would love to hear your ideas as well. You can also find more inspiration from me on Facebook, Pinterest and Instagram. And if you want to keep watching, have a look at the next video on your screen where I show you even more ways to use these products. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you next Monday. Bye bye!